Hi, Cara.
Hello, Vanessa.
No one will be surprised when they learn that our guest today is basically the guru of advice about transitions to college and within college, because you and I are sitting here with two college freshmen about a month into school. So this might have been a slightly self-serving guest choice, but with everything we do, it is slightly self-serving because we learn from every guest, but also it is a way to help this community of listeners because Harlan Cohen is such a gift to caregivers and kids out there.
I mean, if you get all the way to the end of the episode, which I hope you do, he says, this is not about college. And it's not. Everything he talks about is really about transition. And it's about embracing rejection. And embracing rejection starts with the adults and trusted adults, caregivers, parents, grandparents, all of it, embracing rejection in their own lives and on behalf of their kids as well. And what does that mean? It's not, it's not about college admissions rejection, so to speak. It's about rejection. It's about wanting to do something and being told you can't, or wanting to join a club and being told that there's no space, or, whatever that thing is. And it's really hard as the person who loves and cares about a kid to recognize that there's a gift to embracing rejection, that the world is all about rejection. And so, okay, like either pivot and move on or try again. But he's not flippant about it. And he's not Pollyanna about it. He is warm and funny and kind and thoughtful, but also really realistic about it.
So if you have a kid who's struggling with making friends or finding community or feeling lonely or a little bit at sea or feeling pressure to succeed or fit a certain mold, this episode is for you, because while it's based in a college context, his advice is actually, let's help kids train to be rejected, to fail, to be uncomfortable long before they ever leave home, because it will serve them well for the rest of their lives. Enjoy. Harlan, it's awesome to have you here. Welcome.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. I am just so grateful that you reached out and we get to do this.
It's pretty cool. So for those of you not on our email chain with Harlan, I saw Lisa Heffernan from Grown and Flown. And as many of you know, Mary Dal and Lisa are beloved friends and colleagues of ours. And I was extolling the virtues of Help Me Harlan and at Harlan Cohen on Instagram and how amazing it is. And Lisa looked at me and she said, I know him. He's a friend. And I said, okay, well, you have one job, which is to connect us so he can come on this podcast. Because Harlan, I spent about 90% of my time on Instagram watching your videos, your advice videos about for college kids, for parents and caregivers of college kids. It is so smart. It's so wise. My kids are like, please stop sending me videos of that
and
guy.
She spends a lot of time on Instagram. Let's just set that baseline.
For work. It's all for work. So this episode is going to be about distilling your millions of hours of guidance about successful launching into college into 45 minutes. Are you ready?
I don't know. Cause I mean, we can try, but I mean, I have a question. I know it might throw you off, but I want to understand, Vanessa, like what came across your feed that really resonated? I know you've seen a lot, but like, is there something that jumped out where you were like, yes?
Can you tell that Harlan also has a podcast? Because we do this all the time when we guest on someone else's podcast, we end up interviewing them. And Harlan just turned the tables in the first.
Harlan, Vanessa loves sloth videos. I'm just going to start there. But you're not a sloth. You're the opposite. of a sloth.
So what do I love
Thank you.
about it? First of all, I love that you're always in motion when you film your videos. You are always in motion. You're usually on your morning constitutional. So you're walking or sometimes you're driving. It feels like you have a thought and you just have to share it in the moment, which feels, very authentic and how Cara and I live our lives, except then we text each other whatever that thought was.
We don't share it to social media, which we probably should.
Which we probably should. You also embrace failure, risk taking, in a way that feels deeply authentic, and I think is super important for kids growing up today. And we're going to get to that in the interview. But I so appreciate that, and maybe that's a good opportunity, Harlan. You have a really wild origin story, and we do love to hear people's origin stories. Because it really informs how they got to do the work, often with tweens, teens, and young adults, which not everybody chooses to work with that population. We do, and you do. How did you get into, I'm going to call you the guru of college advice, not college admissions advice, surviving college, thriving in college. How did you get to it? Because it's a really awesome journey.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. I really am so grateful to be able to just help make sense of things that are so emotional and so difficult. I mean, you both do a wonderful job of doing that as well. And I was I'm going to go deep, okay? Like, I was thinking back to middle school because I've been really processing middle school even more with my therapist, like legit, because
this is perfect.
Yeah. Like middle school, like I hated middle school. Like I didn't like school. And I think it was even traumatic. And I don't say I think it was traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
I was very overweight and I never really felt good enough. And I was really funny. Now I can still be really funny. Like that was the thing. I got that. So I was able to mask my deep discomfort in this humor. But, middle school, they tore the middle school that I went to down. Right. And which is a good thing.
Were you driving the bulldozer?
That would have been, that's how they could have raised money. Right. They wanted to like put a bench or something. No, because I have such deep feelings of sadness and just, I didn't enjoy it. And what I saw is there were a lot of other students on Facebook who went there for like the final walkthrough, which like, I didn't need one, like I could close my eyes and walk through that place and I don't need to see it again. And, but the thing is, I don't think anyone knew, right? Like I'm the youngest of 3 kids. I don't want to be trouble. There's an 8-year difference between the oldest and me, then 5 years with me. So I'm like the easy one. Then I went to high school. So the transition from 8th grade to high school was really hard for me. Transitions and changes have been difficult. And just socially, it was hard.
I want to dive into some really specific areas around college because we're taping this episode about, anywhere from a month to 2 months into this school year. Cara and I both have freshmen in college. And so we have 2 older kids who've already been through a few years of school. So we have the personal experience plus the experience of working with and knowing thousands of families across the country dealing with this. And I want to ground us because you've been doing this for over 2 decades. What has changed before we go into how do we handle it? What do we do? How can we support kids? I want to get a sense of what is different. How have things changed, on college campuses? Obviously, it's a quite a fraught moment on many college campuses right now politically. So give us a sense from your perspective.
Well, I've been doing this for over 25 years. And I started doing this when I was an advice columnist for the Indiana Daily Student. And people started to write me and I would just like being funny and it was fun. And then I started to get real questions from real students who were dealing with real problems. I started to reach out to experts. So really, I've been doing this for so long, talking to so many people. And, I'd say the thing that stays the same, and I'll get to the different, but I think the constant is there are so many students who are struggling with change. There are so many students who are not equipped to manage rejection and adversity. I'm obsessed with rejection. And I want to just drop in the universal rejection truth, because the universal rejection truth is the thing I'm the most proud of. And this has been the constant, but it's the ability to cope with rejection that I've seen change over the years, which is a combination of lots of things. And I'm sure, a lot of it is the constant 24/7 IV drip of rejection that we get through social media. It can be acceptance and wonderful. It can be such a positive way to connect. But there's like a fire hose of information that young people need to process. They don't have a framework to process this. And that's really where the universal rejection truth, and I want to make sure I get this out. It's this law of nature that says you could be the best, the brightest, the most deserving, the most prepared, and not everyone and everything's going to respond the way you want. Always. Right. So with your kids going through the college transition, the universal rejection truth of friendship. Not all people you meet are going to be your friends. The universal rejection truth of roommates. Not all roommates are going to get along. The universal rejection truth of life in the classroom for those high achievers. I've been talking to lots of valedictorians who are really struggling because they don't know about rejection and they think it's them. But the universal rejection truth of life in the classroom is everyone can't get an A.
Can I ask a question about this? Because I find the phenomenon spot on. How much in your sort of quarter of a century of observing how this landscape has shifted, how much of that is on the adults who are raising the kids who will often insulate their kids from the rejection, or how the parents are sometimes they're put in this bucket that I don't think is unfair, which is a bucket of my kid does nothing wrong. My kid can fail no one ever. I guess my question is, at what point is universal rejection a bigger problem? Because there's so much rejection from everywhere that the trusted adults in a kid's life don't want to reject them and falsely lift them up. And now they've got both universal rejection and they've got this I don't even know what to call it, this buoying thing that happens at home. And how much it has been impacted by that, and where is that balance? Because the people who listen to this podcast, by and large, are those trusted adults who they're trying to do better.
Yeah. Well, I think the trusted adults are doing their best and they're wonderful. And this idea of, whose responsibility is it? Because I don't want any parent or caregiver to think that they've done something wrong. But, we live in a culture where we want our kids to know they're valued and we want them to be successful. And there's a scarcity mindset when it comes to college and life, that there's not going to be enough. And if we fail, we're not going to get into that school or have access to that life, which the data says is not true. It's not where you go, it's what you do. And what I've learned over the years is that this inability to practice rejection, to work through rejection. And here's the thing. See, I started this off talking about, I'm 51. I talked about when I was 13 and the pain, right? And that pain feels like it's yesterday. And that is the rejection. And for adults, I think most of us in some aspect of our life, whether it's social, emotional, physical, financial, or professional, are still in rejection denial and still struggle accepting ourselves. So to expect a parent to be able to process their kids' challenges and adversity and guide them when so many of us are struggling and working through them, I think is unrealistic. So the starting point is, as a parent or as a caregiver, when you are uncomfortable about something, how willing are you to look in the mirror and acknowledge what it is that makes you uncomfortable? And then ask yourself, what am I going to do to change the things I don't love and work to embrace the things I can't change? So I think that's the starting point. But then this universal rejection truth, labeling it and naming it is so key, because what it does is it unlocks a different mindset, a different way of processing input. So when I don't get the response I want, because I have knowledge of the universal rejection truth, I have to ask myself 3 questions. Is it me? Am I the problem? Is it someone or something else? Is it the school? Is it the professor? Is it the roommate? Or is it the universal rejection truth? or maybe a combination of them all. And then I just want to finish this thought, because when you look at teenagers who hurt themselves or hurt other people, I would say, I don't want to use absolutes, but almost always there's some sort of rejection involved and an inability to process that rejection because they have a fixed mindset. So when they're receiving this input or the world's not responding, either you're the problem or I'm the problem. What happens is it's either you or me, you or me, you or me, you or me. And then eventually you bounce, bounce, bounce until you end up just giving up or hating other people. But the universal rejection truth removes that ceiling because it now gives us a process. It's the missing piece of growth mindset.
I mean, and let's think about all the rejection kids face. You talked about finding transitions hard. I mean, I don't know anyone who's good at transitions. I'm certainly terrible at them. And seemingly all 4 of my children are too. They just show it differently. All of the rejections that happen when one gets to college, right? You and your roommate don't get along. You don't get into the classes you want. You don't have anyone to sit with in the, in the dining hall. You approach kids to hang out and they blow you off. You don't get into a fraternity or a sorority or a pre-professional club. You don't make the club sports team. You don't make the marching. I mean, it's just one after, it's like auditioning over and over and over again at a place where you feel like you have no safety net because you are on your own, probably for the first time. Maybe you don't know anyone at all. I mean, the reminder that it's not them, right? That it's a universal fact and not them. I think it's hard, Harlan, though, because it's like, I feel like that's the kind of conversation you have with a kid and you know it so deeply to be true in your heart, but it's one of those things that's so hard for them to hear and not blow off and not push back on and not, frankly, not reject what you were trying to share.
And I love that, because I think one of the reasons that I've been able to reach so many people is that I'm so comfortable getting rejected, and I'm so comfortable sharing something without requiring people to respond one way or another. I offer it, I tell students when I'm talking to them, I go, listen, I'm going to share this with you and you can listen to me or not. And if you want to take a nap, that's fine. But what I'm offering is actually going to help you. Maybe it'll help you to find a date. Maybe it'll help you to get in a club or activity. Maybe it'll help you to find friends. And here's the thing, I'm going to go home and my life's going to be good. But I'm sharing this with you and you have a choice, because then I give them all the power.
Right.
And I think that's one of the problems with parents is parents have the power. So I can come in there as the person who has no power. I can share this. I can help that high achieving student who's used to getting things. This is one of the things that's so tricky about these high achieving students is they have to be so successful in so many different areas of their life in order to get in. And I was talking to a director of admissions about this at a very selective school. I was saying, the students who are like the 3.5s, 3.2s, who have an emotional intelligence and awareness, they're penalized. And you need those students there because they're going to remind those achievers and model, and for the parents of the high achievers and for the students, you could be the best, you could be the smartest, you could be the most desirable. And when you get into that, the Ivy clubs, the highly selective clubs where you have to audition or fill out application, the majority of people don't get in. And I do one-on-one coaching as well. And there's someone who I've been coaching who his first year, brilliant kid, didn't get into any of these clubs or activities, right? Second year, didn't get in. And now we're working on a path where he's going to be okay, but he doesn't know how to manage it. Most people don't because they don't have practice.
Harlan, you're giving advice in 2024 that comes from this seedling of experience you had in the 80s and 90s. What are 1 or 2 or 3 tips that you can offer that help kids today build that resilience and get good at rejection? Because it's a different day, right? It's a different time. So do you have any pearls?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have so many. I think there's 850 life tips, now 1,200.
See how I teed that up?
I can totally do it. I love this question because I'll throw a few. One is to look at the things you do as experiments. Because when you call it an experiment, you can remove the requirements of the outcome because data informs you. And if you're aware of this universal rejection truth, and I loved how you mentioned that, like, a lot of young people don't have the insight and the self-awareness to really process all aspects of it. But all you need to know is there's this truth that says you could be great and you might not get what you want. And there's athletes who have, shown this. Steph Curry talks about missing and struggling and not being drafted. And then he sat in a room, he sat in gyms and took practice after practice shot. And it was the coaches. So it's the people in your corner. So another tip is find the kindest people who are living the life you want to live and lean on them. Right? Right. Easy, right? So safe, right?
Love that.
Then it's the places I love is design a life where you always have one or two places where you are included and appreciated and welcome simply because you exist. I could have used that, right?
All of us could have.
Right? Oh, and even now in life, it's like, this is the beautiful thing when a lot of parents, their kids will leave and the community that they were a part of, they no longer have that community where they're welcome and included, and they feel a deep sense of sadness and loneliness and grief. And for those, I started a group called the Year 13 for parents on Facebook. It's only like 3 weeks old, and it's such a warm community. And it's an idea. The idea is to have a place where you can be supported, and the goal is to have physical groups where involved parents who are no longer part of their communities can maybe host something once a month or whatever it is. But find the places where you're accepted and included simply because you exist. Places where you sweat, play, pray, live, learn, lead, love, and work. So a spiritual group. I was walking the campus at the University of Miami, and I met a couple students in the Marine Mammal Rescue Group, the debate team. Those are places where you don't need to audition at the University of Miami. Every school has these. So if I'm someone who's really struggling socially or has had a hard time socially, when I'm looking at schools, I wouldn't look at the rankings, throw them out the window. I would think about people, places, patience. Where are the places, and think about where you found community before. Think about where you're going to find community in college, and let that be your launching pad.
And there's a difference between finding community and finding friendship. And I think it's really important to just call that out for a second. My daughter, who is a junior in college, went to college and had one of the easier transitions I had seen. She made the best friends of her life, couldn't find community. And had gone to a very progressive high school. So she had the language for it. She understood what she was hungry for. She loved her friends, but her friends were all interested in these very different extracurricular activities. And she's knocking on every door trying to get in. And she's facing rejection at every turn, and helped me understand as a parent the enormous difference between finding good friends and finding community. And by the way, the end of that story, which is a hilarious end to a story, frankly, is that my 5'3" daughter, who had never played a sport in her life after AYSO soccer at age 4, walked on to the women's heavyweight rowing team. Wow. And she became the coxswain who steers the boat and motivates these incredible, strong women. By the way, I've driven with my daughter, and I'm like, really? You became a coxswain? But she did. And she has had the most incredible experience. Why? And she will be the first one to say it. She found community. She found people who, exactly what you just said, they love her for who she is and for what she brings to the team. And so that's separate and apart from friendship.
But Harlan, a lot of people, you go on any Facebook page of any college for parents' Facebook page, and one of the most common messages you see is, my kid is really lonely. My kid is struggling to meet people. My kid is struggling to make friends. And luckily, Cara Talia didn't have that experience.
That's
because
right. Very
as
lucky.
we know, it's one of the most painful things as a parent to watch your kid not have even one person or not
painful
have
and
friends.
common.
Yes, incredibly common. And so And it's funny because Hoda and Jenna last week had a clip on the Today Show where they were laughing about parents making play dates for their college students on these Facebook groups. And I love them. This is not a diss on them. And I understand how if you don't yet have a college student, you would find that absurd and laughable. And yet for those of us who do have college students, we know how much we worry about our kids' wellness. We're in a mental health crisis in this country, and then we're sending them away. What is your advice you gave great advice for the kids about finding spaces and all of that. What is the advice for the caregivers who are trying to support those kids?
Well, I think the advice is really the same as I give to students. And it's people, places, patience. Who are your people? Where are your places? And then how long will it take to get where you want to go? And the patience is the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hardest part. And just hearing the story, Cara, of your daughter who found her community, and she probably didn't find it the first 3 months, maybe the first year, the second year, probably took a little while, right? How long?
It was the very end of her freshman year that she was able to pull the lens back and recognize.
So, that first year really is the getting comfortable year. And that's another thing I do is I rename it the getting comfortable year. And a caregiver can rename it the getting comfortable year and call it an experiment and abandon expectations. A parent who abandons expectations really makes it safe for their child to go through whatever experience. Because I was at this conference called NACAC, the National Association for College Admission Counseling. And one of the counselors said, when a student's crying in their office, they're not crying because they're upset. They're crying because they're disappointing their parents. And that question of the expectations and how do those expectations align with the pace that your students going through. And, for parents is another, and caregivers, it's this thing of what if you just gave your child permission to be lonely and uncomfortable for the first year? COVID was practice because what COVID did is it cut people off from people and places. And they were questioning who they were. They didn't really have a lot to do. They didn't know how to be on their own. And that was a really great test of how can you deal with loneliness and be patient. So whenever I'm going through change, I've gotten great at change. I am so good at change now. Vanessa, I have to tell you, I embrace it. And I've changed the narrative where I used to say...
You can talk to my husband because he basically, every time my kids have a transition, they're like, well, you're better at it than your mother is because she still sucks at transitions. I'm going to say, Raj, I have a new friend and he loves change. So I'm going to emulate him. So what did you do, Harlan? Like, what did you do? And then how do we translate that to kids who are like, I don't want to hear what not you, but me or Cara or their parents have to say?
It starts early, and if you're a parent of a first year college student, it could still start now. It's fine. It's okay. You can make this pivot. But when it comes to parents of younger kids having a transition plan, really thinking, what is a transition plan? Right. And I know when kids go through recovery and they're going into a situation where they could be triggered or there could be dangerous choices, you pre-plan, right? You pre-plan. So using all the transitions from 8th to 9th grade, so wonderful. I talk to counselors and I have an exercise where it's a template where you tell the story of your year, the first week or whatever. It's May 2025. I had the best year ever. I accomplished fill in the blank. What's something kind of scary that you want to do? Because we want them to practice wanting, because a lot of people don't know how to want because they're so afraid of not getting what they want. So really starting to exercise that want muscle. And then I was able to get, whatever it is, I made this team. The most uncomfortable part was, it wasn't very good. I leaned on these 3 people to help me, and I put myself in this place to be able to work towards this goal, and I accomplished it. I'm so proud of myself. You do this before anything's happened. So it's an exercise of how can I transition? And then when I help students navigate college, I do this program called Best First Year. It's a coaching program as much for parents as it is for students. And as we approach, it starts really in January of the senior year, where I start risk taking and a foundation for being able to withstand the discomfort, and then introducing this framework of what do you want, what makes you uncomfortable, people, places, patience, tell your story, celebrate, reflect, and repeat. So, this is a big answer, but I think it connects a few actionable steps. And Cara, I'd love for you to jump in.
I want to just make an interesting call out. I'm listening to what you're describing, and you said the 8th to 9th grade transition. And I was thinking about how that's such a good tethering moment. So when your kid is leaving high school, going to their next step, you can call back to that. This year's freshmen in college, first years in college, had COVID in their 8th to 9th grade transition. And I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on how that will impact this shift, because their learning curve is a little different, having had that experience. That's one question. And then I want to circle back to goals in a second. But can you talk a little bit about that?
That is a conversation I've had with my wife, because my oldest just went to college, and his last transition was in a time where there was so much trauma, so much uncertainty. No one really developed those life skills. Right. And now so many students are feeling that sense of loneliness that I think is connected to trauma that was never really recognized or acknowledged because they went through this. And I think for them, those feelings of panic and that fear, it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of those students are reliving some of those moments, feeling those, and now they have to work through that. So it's magnified even more.
I would offer a flip side to that, which gets to your earlier point, Harlan, which is my second, who came on the podcast. Cara and I had our 2 college freshmen on the podcast right before they left for school. And his freshman year, and he would say this if he was here, of high school was a disaster. It was a disaster. It was a disaster of COVID plus all this executive functioning plus Zoom plus,
he got to go to school because he was in New York.
And he actually attended school, unlike Cara's kids. And what he would say was that what he learned that first year and then pulled himself out of in the subsequent years of high school are the things he looks back to with the most pride and the most learning and the most strength, because he was like, I was there and now I'm here and I can do this again. Now, his learning wasn't trauma. It was just a long, slogging, arduous journey. I think there are kids who sadly had incredible trauma and really profound mental health struggles. But I do think we can point them back to these moments. We're filming this episode on October 7th, 2024. And my oldest child was in Israel on October 7th, 2023. And I texted him this morning and I said, can you believe you made it through this year? That he can draw on not the trauma, but the strength and the bravery to navigate that moment. And partially, Harlan, I wonder what can kids hear best? Because when we frame it like that, sometimes they're like, ugh, I don't want to talk about it. Or like, ugh, why are we revisiting it? Or like, ugh, enough already. How do we reframe their journeys, their courage, their strength in ways that they can hear it?
Well, I think you did such a beautiful job of just illustrating the other side of you made it through. Like you made it through that. And I think that almost every child has had that thing that scared them that they were able to make it through. And that's the runner. Sometimes I'll tell the story of your week. Like if you get the Sunday scaries or you're a little overwhelmed, okay, let's go to Sunday. Okay, what is it that happened? And you go through the things that are in front of you that scare you as if it happened. And the thing is, you could do anything because you've done this before. You've done this week after week. It just feels very big. So it's just reframing it and helping them to see that they can do these. They can do it. And then, but when we don't see it, I think it's also helpful to really paint that picture. And this takes a caregiver who's really comfortable with acknowledging the reality of, listen, you're in a new place. You're surrounded by all these people. You're dealing with so many new feelings, and this loneliness thing, no one really tells you in high school, this is part of it, right? And you're there. And the fact that you're there and you get up every day or maybe 3 times a week, however many times you're getting up and going to class, that is a victory.
Yeah.
That is a victory. Now, for a parent to do that, they have to really release themselves from those expectations. And they really need to honor the fact that those are wonderful things. And their pace is their pace, which also connects to, I get so many messages, social media, parents, caregivers who are concerned because their kids haven't made friends yet, or they haven't gotten involved. And I've started to respond now with, that's okay. Some people need to observe. Some people need to get a lay of the land, and maybe that's who they are. But I would just, if they're not getting involved after 2 years, maybe that's a bigger concern.
I mean, I want to go back to Scary Sundays. I call them the Sunday night blues as a good example of, you've been through this before. That is a glass is half full version. The glass is half empty version, which is often the default mode for a lot of people, is I've been here before. I felt this way before. I don't want to feel this way again. The reflection back on a transition at one point earlier in your life, if it really felt crummy, can feel negative. It's very Pavlovian, right? You just go right back there. And so I just want to circle back to a comment you made about goals and goal setting.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about setting essentially short-term goals and these very achievable goals, small goals. I can get through this week and do this. I have connected with 2 people. The stakes are so high when kids go through their tween and teen years. It's like every year that they progress, the expectations of them are so much higher. It feels like it's all riding on that moment, which is such silliness, right? Of course, but like, this is how it feels to them. And so I'm wondering what advice you can offer to help people dial their goals back, whether it's the adults in the equation or the kids, to dial their goals back, because it really is the small baby step goals that generally get you over the hurdle, right? It's the making of a friend. It's the getting through a week. It's the taking of a test. In your freshman year of college, in your first month of college, you are not, maybe you are on a pre-professional path, but you got 4 years. You've got time. It's great to have long-term goals, but what I hear you preach so beautifully is about having closer goals. Can you talk about that a little?
I think it's when we get into trouble, when we start to feel that overwhelm and discomfort and catastrophize, that we're not gonna reach our big goal. I'm not gonna graduate. I'm not gonna have this career. I'm not gonna have this life. And I do think it's really important to have those big goals too, like those big dreams. I think they're really inspiring and they're motivating and activating. But I think there's also this part of, okay, you can still have that, right? You can still have that. But when you're in that place, living that life, you're going to have to practice how to deal with small, uncomfortable moments, right? So as preparation for that big thing that you can still live and achieve, why don't you look at this as, what's one thing you can do that can help you to prepare? So it's kind of yes-anding and just breaking it down and saying, now we have someone to work with. Like when it comes to talking to a professor, if you don't get the grade you want, or a teacher, advocating for yourself, they get really scared. That's so scary. But if you're, let's say, an engineer working for NASA and you've got a team and you notice something that's not going well, right? You're going to have to talk to your team. So let's look at this as practice for talking to your team, as now you being someone who's on that team talking to that person, and then breaking it down into what's so scary. They're gonna, and this is where I get really into the details of. I was talking to a bunch of seniors. It was so fun. I was visiting one of my son's classes, and there was a high achieving student who was nervous about potentially talking to professors, finding them intimidating. And I said, "You're really smart, right? And you can do anything, right? Yeah." He says, "Why do you find them intimidating? I'm afraid they're going to think I'm not smart enough, right?" Well, here's the thing: are you supposed to know everything? Right? Are you supposed to know as much as your professor? Well, no. So if you're not as smart as your professor, you're actually that's your role. This is great. And if they know more, you can give them permission, and not that you have to give anyone permission, but you can give yourself permission to listen and learn more, which
Yep.
will probably even get them to be more interested in you because they're going to do their job.
So let's take that pressure that the kids feel to know everything, to have conquered everything, right? They're feeling tremendous pressure.
Yeah.
And they're feeling that pressure the minute they get to college as they think about their futures and they think about the summer internship and the jobs after college. I have been astounded at how quickly college students are now facing pressure to apply for internships and thinking about the path. I mean, the poor kids just got themselves into college and then it starts all over again. And then there's the pre-professional organizations and fraternities and clubs. And I mean, it sort of doesn't end. But when you say to them, hey, kiddo, like, don't worry about it. I didn't know what I wanted to do all through college. I didn't know what I wanted to do in my 20s. And you tell them that, and they're like, that is not helpful advice because I am not living in the world you lived in. I'm living in the world I live in, and I feel pressure, and I've got to get over 500 connections on LinkedIn, and I got to get my resume. I mean, I don't think I had a resume till senior year of college, and got, college freshmen with better resumes than I do. So, Harlan, how do we both support them in the reality they're in, which is this different reality, while also helping them be critical consumers of this culture that's pressuring them to take a certain path?
I think when they have these narratives, they have to do it in a certain timeline. It's really helpful for them to talk to someone who has been through this, talking to someone who's maybe 10 years ahead of them, talking to someone who's a family friend or someone who they've known through like an alumni group, or even when they're doing the interview process, like how about this to spin things on their head, asking the interviewer, like, did you always know this is what you wanted to do? And, was your first job your best job? It's like when you talk to people who are living those experiences, and I try to capture as many of those as possible, it's wonderful. And I think that another pushback of caregivers and parents is the tone of our voice. Like my kids will never listen to me as well as your kids might listen to me, right? Because I think it falls into a space almost like when there was Apollo whatever, where it was like in a blackout zone when it was coming back to Earth and they couldn't receive it. And I think that's how parents are. So
it's in the blind spot.
Yeah, it's like they
our
don't,
voice lives in the blind spot. Yeah.
Yes. And
yes.
And that is why, I'm not that brilliant, right? I could just say the same thing that you're saying and it will land in such a better way, right?
I can't tell you the number of patients that when I was in practice who I used to literally say the exact same words that their parents would say, and the kids would go, oh, and then the parent would just, some of them would lose it in the room. I have asked you to do that 10 times. Your voice is in the blind spot. Yeah.
So having someone else to repeat that, I think it's really important to have someone, and for a parent who can't get through or caregiver to say, hey, why don't you talk to this person or ask that person, because they can help. And then this other piece of it is such a long game. Mm-hmm. And I tell people that it is such a long game. You need to, this is where it all comes together. You need to experiment. It's an experiment. Try it for a year or 2 years. Make it an experiment. See who you talk to. See how that feels. And if that doesn't work, then shift and have another experiment. And you're going to learn. So then talk to the people who can help you and support you. Put yourself in places where you can do things that align with things that you really enjoy, and appreciate that you're going to get rejected a lot. But that's the universal rejection truth. And this is the secret sauce, is when you get rejected, that is the beginning of a wonderful relationship with so many of these people, because you now have an opportunity to reach out to them. And most students don't follow up when they try out for clubs, activities. I talked to a recruiter. I said, if somebody reaches out and says, I'm so grateful I had the chance to interview with you, I really would love to be part of your team. What is something I could do in the future to be better qualified? They might tell you. If it's a club or organization where a student wants to get in, I encourage them, talk to those people and see what can you do over the next year. And then you could say, in the meantime, if you ever need anyone to do marketing, carry any equipment, put up flyers or whatever. Even though I'm not a member, I'm always happy to do whatever work just because I would love to support the group in any way, right? That stands out. And you have to be great at rejection, and you have to practice this. And this goes back to Vanessa earlier saying, like, what could they do? What could people do? And I think it's those small things of when you're in middle school, the student talks to the teacher.
Yep.
When there's a problem, they reach out to the people. See, who are the people who can help you? Who's a teacher who's really an ally, who could be there for you? Where's a place if you're not feeling comfortable in the lunchroom where you can study, or you can just have lunch and feel a little bit better, maybe in the library or like a buddy club or something. But it's people, places, patience, and practicing patience with an understanding that patience is the ability to tolerate discomfort while navigating change and going through the things you're going to deal with. And now, as someone who is a former I hate change person, listen, I don't love change, and change scares me. There's a lot of big changes in my future. But I understand that when I'm feeling those big feelings, I have a framework that I'm going to default to. And that framework enables me to be okay during difficult times of change.
Yeah, not amazing. You're not at a 10 out of 10. You're okay. And you can weather it and survive it. And so one last question before we let you go, Harlan, and I hope you will come back. What is the question you wish adults, relatives, family, friends would ask kids when they come home for fall break or Thanksgiving or Christmas break from college? Because I know the question should not be, do you love it so much? Are you so happy? Are you having the best time? Because that just puts all the pressure on the kids to be having the best time, or to say they're having the best time, even if they're struggling. What do you wish those adults, those well-meaning, loving adults, would ask kids instead?
What time do you want to get up? And whatever time is perfectly okay with me. And what do you need to do to really refuel and find a great sense of balance while you're home, right?
And if it's not hang out with you, mom or dad, that's okay.
Right.
And they're so tired when they come home. They are so tired.
You've seen that, right? You've seen it firsthand. They're emotionally exhausted because they've had to be in this performance mode for so long. And so they're physically exhausted, they're emotionally exhausted from the academics, from getting sick, because they probably got sick 3 or 4 times already since they've been there.
They're literally exhausted because they're not sleeping very much.
Yeah, and they're not sleeping. Yeah. So this idea of really just rest and refuel, and whatever you need, let me know. And we're gonna do some things, and you're welcome to participate in as much or as little as you want. And I'm just so happy you're here.
Well, we're so happy you're here, Harlan. Thank you for joining us. That's amazing.
Oh, you're so fun. We could talk for hours,
Yes, we could. Yes. Yes, we could. You need to come back because I have 20 more questions that we didn't get to. So we invite you back when you have time, and we will link to all your amazing resources in the show notes, because what you offer and what you do is so reassuring and so helpful and so relatable. This is not pie in the sky stuff. Mm-hmm. This is really stuff that people can take on board, kids, adults, and those folks living in between being a kid and an adult who we love so much.
Well, thank you. And I just want to close with one more thought. I appreciate that this is not about college, right? This is about life, and college is really just a disguise for practicing navigating change, because life is transition. The bookends of life are transition, and in between are all these changes. And this is one of the most powerful ones that so many young people go through, and we go through as caregivers and parents. So it's a wonderful time to just pause and think not just about college and this change, it's for all of us. What do we want? What do you want? What do I want? Right? What makes us uncomfortable? And how can we just take a step in the direction that might be uncomfortable and scary, but exhilarating?
And I love this idea of when you write the story of this week or this year, what will that story be? Because I always frame it, no one will be surprised to hear this, in the negative, which is what's the worst that can happen. But by framing it as, what do you hope the story is? It can include the stuff they're worried about, but can also include the victories and the wins, right. Small ones, big ones, and help it feel more manageable. So I really appreciate that reframing, and I'm going to annoy my children by using it at the dinner table tonight.
The thing is, a lot of people find it scary to even imagine the best case scenario because they don't want to be disappointed. Right. So imagining the worst is easier, but what it does is it just has you imagine two bad situations twice or three times as opposed to one great situation and maybe no worst case scenario or possibly, but you train your brain and it feels so good. It just feels so good to imagine good, exciting things.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Harlan.
Thank you, Harlan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Very grateful.
Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.